What's up, guys? I'm Sam.
I'm Corey.
So the new BRZ and GR86 are one of the most popular platforms you guys are modifying. A ton of them in the gallery, but we wanted to go a little bit more in-depth today and show you some wheel and tire setups on this car and kind of the pros and cons and how the fitment looks on each of those setups.
All right, guys, so we have 8 different wheel and tire setups. We've got everything from show to track to daily driver. We even threw a random one in here that was kind of had a bit of mystique on the internet. Nobody really knows for sure if it's gonna fit or not. So we're gonna do it for you guys. We're gonna answer all the questions here. So at the end of this video, you will know if you wanna track your car, this is the wheel and tire setup you should use. If you wanna daily your car, this is the wheel and tire setup you should use.
So we're gonna put each 8 of the wheel and tire setups on this BRZ so you guys can see how they fit and if you have to actually add camber, lower, raise the car, all that stuff. So, a couple things to go over before we start. First, this car is lowered on evolved coilovers, and for the tires, we're almost always gonna use a Vercelli Strada tire for consistency because tires don't always run true to spec. Just like when you're buying shoes, the size is gonna be run a little different between manufacturers. Also, we'll go over the rear of the car, how the new GR86 and BRZ has like a little aero enhancement thing on the rear fender that can make fitment a pain in the butt. Did I forget anything, Corey, or is that about it?
I think that's it. You covered the doodad, you covered the coilovers. We're good to go.
Cool, we'll get into it. Okay, so you guys might wonder why we're not using this lift that's right behind us. Well, we know a lot of you guys don't have lifts, and it's gonna be faster also for us. Just put jacks under the car and do one side at a time rather than get it up on the lift and off the lift. Lower car is kind of tough. All right, so we're gonna put our first set on the car. Corey, what do we got?
We've got a set of Enkei RPF1 17x8 with some 225 Vercelli Stradas. This is gonna be one of the smaller packages that you can run. It's gonna be great for the track, and let's see how it fits.
All right, so we're gonna start jacking off now. So I got Corey here, so you don't wanna do this by yourself. Always make sure you have a friend. So we're not using the lift, we're just gonna lift one side of the car at a time. I don't have to go crazy speed.
Listen,
you like the two-hand technique?
I watched the 80s workout videos.
All right, we're all the way in the air. So one thing you're gonna wanna do is use a torque wrench when you're actually putting your wheels on. So your lug nuts should come with a torque spec. Motegi is usually around 80, 85 foot-pounds. We're just putting these on for show purposes. We're not gonna use torque wrench, but you should. So when you're test fitting your wheels, you always wanna give them a spin as well. Just make sure that you clear the brake caliper, everything else, your arms, all that stuff. All right, we got them in the car. What specs are these again, Corey?
All right, so we've got the 17x8 plus 45 Enkei RPF1s. They're wrapped in the Vercelli Strada 225/45. So super meaty sidewall here. Pretty small wheel.
But as far as a daily driver or going to the track, it is a good setup because it does allow you to run a meatier tire if you wanted to, or a slightly lower offset wheel, probably like a 10 millimeter or so when we're looking at it. Offset wheel if you want to be a little more aggressive, but this is pretty conservative for what you'd be running for daily driver or track. And like I said, they're lightweight, they're 17s. A lot of you guys are in 18s, but I think the 17s look really good on these cars.
Yeah, I think they look great, and you can tell they're super lightweight because Sam had no problem getting them on the car.
All right, so in the rear, kind of similar story to the front, we got plenty of room for activities here. No rubbing, no scrubbing. There's a little aero enhancement in the back fender. It's on the new BRZ and GR86. No issues with this fitment, but we'll probably have some issues later on. We'll get into that, but you can go with a little meatier tire back here or a slightly lower offset wheel if you really wanted to, but this setup works really well. It's looking better. It's a little bit more Fitment Industries here.
Yep,
oh, God.
I like this setup a lot more. So what's crazy about this setup is this is only a ½ inch different and 7 millimeters. And we made this big.
I would say ½ an inch is a lot, like quite a bit, honestly.
The proof is in the pudding. Half inch makes a big difference.
Okay, so this setup is a little bit more aggressive, still a track-inspired setup, but Corey, what are the specs on this one?
All right, so this is a 17x8.5 plus 38 with a 235/45 tire, so slightly chunkier in the rubber and slightly wider on the wheel.
So when we go up front here, compared to the RPF ones we had on there, we're definitely a lot closer to the fender. You got inner fender liners on these cars. You don't have to worry about taking those out yet, but it's a little bit closer. Still fine for daily driving. No clearance issues with the coilovers or the brake rotors, brake pads. Sorry, I'm trying to say brake calipers. No issues with that at all. You go to the rear, Corey, how we looking? Pretty good?
Yeah.
No issues?
I mean, it is crispy. If you want flush fitment, this is it.
You're also gonna have to watch your spring rate in the rear, a little bit in the front, but more so in the rear, because under compression with acceleration, or if you hit a pretty decent bump going into McDonald's with that Big Mac, you are gonna rub the inner fender liner with the tire here, and it is loud in these cars when you're on the inside. But overall, this is kind of what I'd go with if it was like a track-inspired style setup. Or if I was taking to the track, I'd go something like this.
I don't know if you mentioned the color when you were talking about the front, but I like this a lot. It's the darker color that contrasts the white really nicely, but it's not so dark that it gets hidden in the shadows like a black wheel. I really, really like this.
Yeah, so we got a bunch of different finishes also for today, so it'll be cool to see those on there. So far, I still like the RPF ones, the gold more.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. Why go for third place with bronze? You get first place with gold. So all the setups that we're doing here are square, and you might be wondering why. That's because actually most of you guys putting your cars in the gallery are running square setups. Square is way more common than staggered on these cars. I would have guessed staggered would be more popular, but you guys seem like the square setups, so that's why we're doing that here too. All right, Corey, so we're back to the RPF ones, and these are looking a little spicier than the first setup. So what are the specs on these?
These are 17 by 9 plus 45 with a 245/40 Vercelli Strada 2 tire.
Nice, so we're getting more aggressive each step of the way here.
Yes.
So let's look at the front, kind of what we've been doing. Once again, no issues with the coilover or the brake caliper. We're getting a little bit close to the outside of the fender where the inner fender lining attaches on some like the plastic clips. You're gonna want a higher spring rate, otherwise you might hit those over time, kind of wear those out. Corey, how's the rear looking? Looking pretty good from up here.
Yeah, the rear is looking crispy. What I honestly find the most interesting about these is that they sit about similar as the 8.5 wides with the plus 38. Whereas these are a little bit further sunk in with the plus 45 offset, but the extra half-inch kind of pulls them back out. So very similar fitment to the Konigs we just looked at.
So no issues with like a fender liner or like little aero piece back there?
We're chilling back here.
Cool.
Again, if you were to go any lower than this or have softer springs, you may run into issues with the rebound, but for the most part, you're good.
So the other thing to note is we have set a lot of like track inspired setup. Really it's track daily drivers, kind of the two things we put together. This isn't a stance setup. You're not going to win any Fitment awards for this, but functionality is definitely higher on the scale here with something like this. And this is what a lot of you guys are going for from what we see, because you're daily driving these cars. There's no like aftermarket arms or crazy adjustment we have on here. So it's all just stock bolted up, just lower on the coilovers mentioned before. All right, we got the Kansei Tandems on the car now. So we went to 18-inch wheels. We were on 17s before, but Corey, what are the total specs on these bad boys?
First of all, the specs are baller because it looks pretty awesome. But 18 by 8.5 plus 35, so a pretty generic wheel size there with a 235/45.
So when we go up front, check out where we're going. It is the most aggressive setup so far. So we are getting really close to the fender liner there. You might have a little rubbing issues. If your car is lowered any more than this, you might get a little bit bacon fender if you hit a bump while you're at lock. But honestly, you could still daily this, not an issue. Corey, the rear is looking good from here. Pretty close to flush.
Rear's looking really good, super flush. The only thing I'm gonna say is, if we're going a little bit lower, this is where we're gonna wanna start introducing that negative camber, because you're gonna be running into some pretty big issues right here, especially when you end up coming back here to the aero enhancement, lots of contact.
So we're not in the danger zone yet, but as Corey was saying, if your car is a little bit lower, we are gonna start in some issues, but overall still easily daily driver. Okay, so this is our most flush Fitment so far. A lot of you guys say this is your ideal daily driver or track setup for the Fitment. So Corey, what are the specs on this?
So this is a 17 by 8.5 plus 42, a little bit further sunk in closer to the car, but the tires are a little bit beefier to make up for that. We've got the 245/40 Vercelli Stratas on here, and I gotta say, it's looking pretty mean.
So let's go on up front here. Don't really have any clearance issues. Corey, you actually want to hop in the car and give it a turn.
Yeah.
So we weren't doing the turn test before because it really wasn't a factor. But now that we're getting pretty close to the fender and the fender lining, it is becoming a factor. So Corey's going to turn the wheel here. we seem to be good. We're getting pretty close to this front marker light though, and I know a lot of you guys that have really flush stance out fitment sort of thing, you're blowing these out all the time, but no issues yet. You can see we still got clearance at this ride height. If you're a little bit lower, it wouldn't be a problem. Let's go on to the back. So in the back here, still no issue. We're starting to have this become a factor, our little fender aero piece here. On compression, when you hit a bump, or on acceleration, depending on your spring rate, this might become an issue, but right now, this is totally fine. But if you have some big bumps, you are gonna rub the tire on the inner fender liner, just kind of FYI, but most of us know that, we'll live with it. Oh yeah, oh yeah. The most aggressive set yet, and we set it for every single one to keep getting more aggressive. But Corey, what are the specs on this? Because we're getting into the danger zone now.
Yeah, these are juicy. 18 by 9 plus 35 with a 245/45 tire. So, I mean, it's sitting like a track super at the moment.
So the issue here, if you don't take the necessary actions to remedy it, is really the tire size, not so much the wheel size, because we got a pretty thick sidewall here. The wheels are good. If you go with thinner sidewall, you'll be fine. So we got this in the car though. Let's dive into what's going on. So in the front, we're in the danger zone 100%. So we really have almost no gap between the tire and the fender. We're gonna do the turn test here. Carefully, keep it coming, Corey. All right, so it just barely clears, but it is slightly rubbing. We're not even at full lock here. And this front marker, that's not gonna be good. So in the front, if you are running this setup, you are gonna wanna add some camber to it so you can make sure you clear. In the rear, so this is looking really nice and meaty, but with great meat comes great responsibility. So this little arrow piece here is 100% an issue right now. So in the rear, I'd wanna add some camber as well, because on any decent sized bump, even with a good spring rate, you're definitely gonna smoke this thing along with the inner fender liner of the wheel well. So you can absolutely run the setup, but if you don't do anything with camber, you're gonna be rubbing like crazy, which is the life you might wanna live. Otherwise, add some camber and you should be good. Overall, the meaty setup, I'm a big fan of. Welcome to the best looking wheel we have in the car today, which is our very own Anovia Kano. So Corey's cleaning up a little dribble he had over there. We're not gonna talk about that situation. But over here, it's a good setup. But Corey, why don't you walk us through the specs?
All right, so we have a 18 by 9.5 plus 38 on a 255/35 tire. So much wider profile with a smaller sidewall. I think it makes it look really, really nice.
So the 18 by 9.5 plus 38 is our kind of perfect fitment for the previous generation FRS BRZ. Corey's gonna hop in the car here and do the little turn test, but in the front, start off with this setup compared to the last one, you're a lot safer. You can add a little bit of negative camber to be extra safe, but here, no issue at all. We've got plenty of clearance between the fender and the wheel, even going to lock there. Your little front fender marker there is fine. Let's move to the rear and take a look back there. So we got a similar story here, more clearance than the previous setup. If you wanted to eliminate this wheel gap or tire to fender gap a little bit, you could lower it, but this is safe as far as for any bumps, daily driving, that sort of thing. Overall, from what we've seen so far, this is probably my favorite setup. We're gonna get more aggressive here, but this is a good compromise between good fitment and also being able to daily it or track and hit some bumps, not have a bunch of rubbing or scrubbing. All right, so we went a little crazy. We put 19s on the car, which not a lot of people are doing. We just want to see what it'd be like, didn't know if it would fit or not, and it does. So Corey, what are the specs we put on here?
So actually, let me correct you. There was one guy on the internet. That's where these specs came from. There was one guy who had no idea if it would fit or not. And that's where Anna was like, well, let's just test it. So we've got 19 by 10 plus 35 with a 225/35 tire. About as aggressive as you can go. And I gotta say, I like it a lot.
So you can adjust the ride height if you want, but the tires are very stretched. So the 225 on the 10.5-inch wide wheel, it's a lot of stretch. We'll have Corey hop in the driver's seat and do the turn test again, but honestly, there's a lot of clearance here and you're getting that because the tire is so stretched. So the downside to that is any sort of bump you hit where the edge of the wheel is going to hit, you have no forgiveness from the tire. The wheel will take all the damage. But we're chilling here. We don't have the center caps on these Rotiform wheels because the lug nuts we have in the car don't allow it. Just another plug to make sure you guys have proper lug nuts if you're buying wheels. Let's go to the back. All right, so in the back, we are good. So plenty of clearance, honestly, no issue here, but once again, that's because the tire is so stretched. If you look at the profile of the wheel to the fender, you are seeing quite a bit of poke here. If you had a tire that wasn't stretched, you would absolutely have some major fitment issues. But if you want to be a big baller and put 19s on your BRZ or GR86, you can absolutely do it.
One thing we didn't mention is if you're rocking air suspension on your GR86 or BRZ, this could be the perfect spec for fender to lip fitment. If you notice, you pull in a little bit of negative camber, drop it down 2 inches, you will be sitting perfectly on this lip. All right, guys, so now we've thrown all of the wheels and tires on the car. You can see what all the different specs look like. If you want to do it even more efficiently, just head over to our gallery. All right, so what did we learn today? We looked at all of the different specs all the way from a 17-inch wheel to a 19 by 10. I think we only found 1 or 2 at the very top end that required any trimming, and most of that's going to be revolved around this aero piece right here. But for the most part, we found that if you just add a little bit of negative camber or reduce tire size by just a smidge, that's really all you're going to need. All of these setups that we put on today are going to fit the car, and quite honestly, they all look awesome. But let's go over to Sam, who's going to talk about what modifications might be necessary if you're going to do this.
You might need to add a little bit of camber from the setups we showed you. So on the stock car, like we have here with the stock arms, you can get about -2.5 degrees of camber. If you want more camber, you can need camber plates in the front and some lower control arms with adjustability in the rear to gain more than 2.5 degrees of negative camber. But if you guys want to see some more examples of what fits on BRZ or GR86, go to our gallery at fitmentindustries.com. But Corey, what was your favorite setup today?
Honestly, I gotta go with the Kansei KNP. It was so thick, it was so meaty.
Meaty boys.
Yeah, the spokes complemented the super thick sidewalls all around. It just kind of made it look like a drag setup. How about you?
I like the Kanos. Super lightweight, chrome, looks sick. I just like the way that worked a little bit more efficiently for a daily driver setup compared to the KNPs. But honestly, a lot of different options. Tell us what you guys like in the comments below. But honestly, appreciate it, guys. But go check out the gallery from fitmentindustries.com.